Shalom everybody, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. We are up to page 153 of volume 2 of Rabbi Victor Miller's new translation and commentary of Duties of the Mind, and we are in part 6 of chapter 4, the fifth category of wisdom, and we are in the second gate, Shah HaBakina, the gate of examining. Okay, so let's look at this next category of one of the signs of the Almighty's wisdom. The fifth category of the subjects that have to be studied are the signs of Hashem's wisdom, which are clearly seen in various creations such as vegetation. Plant seeds vary from plant to plant. Some have burrs, which are seed pods covered with tiny hooks that stick to passers-by, both man and animal. The seed pods are carried far and wide, and when they drop to the ground, new plants will grow. Did the plant know that a person or animal might pass by and carry away its seeds? Did it make a curious conscious choice to coat its seeds? Did it make a conscious choice to coat its seeds with burrs so that they could get a free ride with unwary travelers? A plant has no intelligence. It is clearly the wisdom of Hashem that is behind the entire process. There are many other remarkable ways in which plants spread their seeds. For example, the touch-me-not plant drops its seeds when touched. Certain geraniums contain their seeds in a capsule with a spring-like function. When a plant becomes dry enough and the spring is both ripe and strong enough, the seed capsule springs open and catapults seeds in all directions. Who made the spring? Why does the spring function only after it becomes ripe and the seeds are ready to germinate? All this happens simultaneously. Here we have yet another simple observation of the mighty acts of Hashem. Another sign of Hashem's wisdom is the common dandelion. Each dandelion seed is attached to a tiny parachute, and a cluster of such parachutes form a spherical head at the top of the plant. The parachutes are waterproof so they don't wilt in the rain, and they don't become loose before the seed is ripe and ready to germinate. They are picked up by the wind when the seeds are ripe and are then carried great distances, with each parachute carrying its tiny seed passenger. And so I'm sure this is a plant that many of you are familiar with. You see them just about everywhere. It's almost considered a weed in Australia. And, a child will pick up a dandelion and blow its sort of spherical head and watch all these tiny little kind of fluffy little seeds with parachutes go in all directions, or go in the direction which they've blown. And it's almost like a rite of passage of being a child. Your childhood isn't complete until you've picked up a dandelion and blown its head. And most people watching the video are probably familiar with these plants and the little sort of idiosyncrasy of them being able to be blown apart. And you've probably never sort of sat down and thought about how that relates to contributing to intelligent design. Anyone can pick up a ripe dandelion head and blow gently to see 30 to 40 parachutes take off, flying gracefully in the air. It's a miracle of miracles, which is there for everybody to see, not just to pass by and ignore it as most people do. That's the great lesson the author is teaching us. The world is made to make known to man his mighty acts. And this is how jaded mankind has become when we don't stop to look at nature and reflect on the wisdom of Hashem. Sure, there's plenty of channels and documentaries that take a person through an aspect of the natural world, and they're phenomenal shows with a lot of insight, but rarely, if any of them, continue that insight to point at a creator. The signs of Hashem's wisdom are also seen in minerals, materials which are taken out of the earth, like metals. Metals have no place in the life of animals. Animals do not quarry for iron, tin, or copper. Even if they could dig for metals, they would be unable to make use of them. Metals are put there specifically for man to use. This is a clear demonstration that this world was made for mankind. And so I would never have thought of that. I would never on my own have come up with those conclusions and make that connection. But again, that's how far away we've been swept from any sort of potential to make a connection with the Creator at any given point. We're just not wired like that in this last generation. And so the challenge is to read books of this nature and redesign our ability to attain wisdom according to the actual dictates of the Torah. Another group of minerals consists of the concrete and cement materials that are used to pave streets and sidewalks. Hundreds of thousands of tons are being poured every day all over the world for paving and construction, and yet none of the creatures of the world need them except mankind. And so this is another tremendous demonstration that the world was made for man. Because of the materialism and atheism surrounding us, we are taught and have become accustomed to thinking of the oil in the earth as an accident of nature. However, oil is not an accident or just something that happens to be there. The tremendous stores of oil in the ground and the bottomless seas were put there by Hashem for people to use. That oil is powering all the vehicles of the world for our benefit to transport people and goods to where they are needed. So when we look at the street filled with streams of traffic, we should remember that this is only possible because of what Hashem has prepared for them under the ground. On the contrary, people today will look at congested traffic and urban sprawls and have nothing good to say about them at all. Yet they will be living in those places themselves. The same is true of natural gas. This is also one of the products which are taken out of the earth. Gas is not an accident. It was put into the ground by Hashem so that all over the world people could heat their homes and cook their food by means of gas. Plastics are another example of a product that is used only by mankind. Animals have no use for plastics. The vast amount of natural petroleum-based materials used in producing plastics are an indication that these materials are there for the purpose of producing plastics for mankind. And again, on the contrary, most people will complain about plastics and say that they're ruining the environment. But if we come up with an appropriate disposal and recycling plan, then that will no longer be a problem, which for the most part is in effect now. So, there's no point continuing to complain about how plastics are ruining the environment when we have in place ways and means to dispose of it correctly or recycle it. And I'm aware that some countries are doing a better job of that than others, but ultimately plastics are for our benefit. And these same people that complain about plastics, if you were to take them aside and say, okay, we're going to go through all of your belongings and anything that contains plastics, we're going to remove from what you own. And they would be very quick to object to that because that would mean they'd lose their car. They would lose many items in their home, critical items even. Although other creatures may get some benefit from those raw materials before they turn into plastics, there is no question that Hashem intended the world for mankind. That is one of the lessons that we need to learn from the plants and from the minerals. And this is, why you see organizations like PETA, I think it's called PETA, who, forbid animals to be mistreated in any way, much less being culled as food. And so they are, in effect, an organization that is working against the good of mankind. And so, in actuality, they're an organization that promotes the well-being of animals over the well-being of mankind. So they're essentially, you could say, they're an enemy of mankind. The phenomena of nature that we have described here are clearly orientated to serving mankind. We can proceed to others which are also clearly for the purpose of serving mankind, although it is less open and obvious, and thus we learn an essential principle: mankind is not merely an accident that occurred in nature as the Apicorsum, the heretics say. Mankind is the purpose of the world, and therefore all nature is engaged in producing products that are designated for the benefit of mankind. And I know there's many people out there that have a love for animals and they want to support animal shelters and different organizations to protect animals in various parts of the world, domestic animals and so on, that are treated far less well in first world countries. And that's all well and good, but when people are doing that and at the same time ignoring the plight of mankind, of many demographics of people all over the world and their living conditions, you have to sort of ask yourself the question, well, where is your concern? Is it over the animal kingdom, or like all the dogs in the world, as opposed to all of humanity? And you will get some people say, I prefer dogs than people. And this is the decision that they've made. They've had a bad experience, and they're just sort of like going, that's it. I'm done with my species. I'm going to focus on dogs. And this is a wrong path for a person to take. They've been damaged in some way, and they're just going to look after dogs. They're just going to have time for dogs, and they won't have time for people. And then they jump up and down, and they get upset when they see that in return people don't have much time for them, and then that just makes them even worse. And so this is sort of becomes a process of diminishing returns. How about you patch up your broken relationship with your own species, and get in good standing with them, and sure, you can still have a love for a particular species of animal and help them in some way through some form of charity, but your primary form of charity is to help your own species, the pinnacle of all creation, which is mankind. But people will argue against that. They'll say, no, I don't like human beings. And you'll see that that's actually a big trait of people who delve into Satanism and so on, and they just have a disdain for human beings. And so it's a fairly sort of contradictory sort of place to be, ideology to hold. You're a human being. Okay, so all these things that you are wanting to commit against your own species, I can commit that against you, can I? And they're like, no. Oh, why? Because I'm different. You're no different to anybody else. This is why people will often sort of trope out the line that I never thought this would happen to me, because that's a giveaway that in some way they think that the world revolves around them. Now let us consider one of the important lessons provided by plants in providing fiber for clothing. Plants represent a major source of raw materials such as linen, cotton, from which we produce clothing. Both linen and cotton have no other purpose than for people to use. When cotton is growing in the field, it is subject to attack by a hungry insect called a boll weevil. Although the boll weevil devours the soft tissue of the plant buds, it is not interested in the actual cotton. In fact, neither animals, birds, or insects are able to eat cotton. Cotton is effectively a product that goes to waste. It falls back into the earth and rots, returning into the material from which it came. Thus, the only purpose of cotton that we see in the world is to be a material that is used for mankind. Now, that's a very, very important thing to cite, because it's a giveaway that Hashem wanted man to be provided with clothing, and therefore there is some sort of produce that emanates from the ground that isn't required for any other purpose. And yet its use as clothing is perfect. The truth is that even without this idea that they were made for mankind, every one of these natural materials would produce important examples of plan and purpose in creation. How does cotton develop from a plant? After all, cotton is a fiber which is almost indestructible. Cotton can last for generations, whereas plants are like a withering grass, which dries up and is recycled immediately. There seems hardly any connection between a plant, which is essentially vegetative matter, and an indestructible fiber like cotton. And yet cotton fibers grow from plants. How can cotton come from grass? Surely that would be a miracle. And it is a miracle, but it's not a miracle that we have accustomed ourselves to notice. We've grown up. And sure, at some point going through school or reading a textbook, we've come across this very same fact, but we didn't stop to think. We just moved on. And so, we're sort of like being led along like lambs to the slaughter, at no point absorbing all these opportunities that we have had over our lifetime. And some of us are, getting towards the end of our lives. And so it's a great miracle and a mercy of Hashem that we're being availed of this knowledge now. Don't be upset that you're only learning these things now, but be grateful to Hashem that He's at least showing you in your mature years if you are, a person that's getting up there in age. Linen too has no purpose except for people to use. When we take this as a model, we understand the purpose of silk, which is produced by the silkworm. This worm needs the silk to make its cocoons, but we should not get sidetracked by that. When we consider the whole world uses silk in making clothing, we must conclude that the primary reason the silkworm produces silk is for mankind. Wool is also an amazing product obtained each year by shearing off the excess hair that grows on the back of sheep. Sheep don't need that much wool covering because it would quickly become overgrown and burdensome if it were not sheared. So we see that the wool is intended to be removed from the sheep by man. It is also instructive to think about how wool grows. If a sheep ate some wool-like substance, we might more easily be able to understand how it became converted into wool on its back. But the sheep eats nothing but grass and water, and if a person could invent a machine to take grass and water and make it into wool, his patent would surely be worth millions. And yet here is a machine that is naturally capable of taking grass and water and making wool. It is very worthwhile to think about this when we see it, and to excitedly proclaim how abundant are your works, Hashem, quoting from Psalm 104:24. And in Australia, sheep are a huge part of life. We export wool to many parts of the world, and there is not a child that's grown up in a primary school that has not had an excursion to go to a farm to see sheep being sheared. At least in my day, and I'm sure up until very recently, if not, that people are continually being shown what that process was like, even though they probably have machines to do it now. There's in school you get taught history, and occasionally you go out to places that are set up to teach children through demonstrative ways how certain things used to be done. But not many people would think that, well, if a sheep doesn't get shorn, it's going to one day be the victim of being out in the wet weather, and then it's going to die. And so, they rely on mankind to shear the sheep at intervals to provide wool for mankind and keep the sheep happy. And of course, there is no creature other than man who uses the wool. So we see that all the sheep in the world are busy working for mankind. That is why the author says, which are prepared for man's benefit. The author wants us to realize the miraculous way in which these products are naturally produced from the raw substances provided by the earth. He also wants us to recognize the fact that mankind is the only user of these products, thereby demonstrating the great principle that the world is made for man. We need to study the many ways that man can benefit from them according to their different natures, composition, and properties. For instance, there are so many ways that we can benefit from metals. Metals are used for coins, keys, locks, bridges, buildings, vehicles, cutlery, and tin cans. The wide variety of uses is matched by a wide variety of metals such as gold, iron, copper, zinc, and tin, each adapted to its use. All of this is made possible by the wealth that is buried in the ground for man to dig up. And it'd be great for this to get outfield and people to become freshly aware of the provisions that Hashem has allowed mankind to avail himself of by having these raw materials being able to be worked into practical things that we use to make our lives enjoyable, to make our lives more than livable. The unique qualities of linen and cotton make them especially suitable for use as clothing materials in hot countries. This is because linen and cotton fibers are straight, and so they allow heat to easily escape. When they are bleached white or dyed in a pastel color, these materials reflect the rays of the sun more easily and thereby help the wearer keep cool. But wool has kinky hairs that trap the air so that it serves as an insulator to keep in the body heat. Thus, wool is especially suitable for keeping people warm when the weather is cold. From our study of these different clothing materials, we understand that there are products appropriate to each season and year. Now the sheep don't know there are seasons, and the flax plant doesn't know that there are seasons. But Hashem does, and he has designed clothing materials that are appropriate to man's needs in each season. Plants have many other purposes that are meaningful to mankind. Every wooden bench and table originates from the seed that grew into a tree, from which planks were cut for a purpose. The miracle of plant growth makes it possible for a tiny oak seed to produce great planks of oak. Through the wisdom and the benevolence of Hashem, the seed gathers a wide range of substances from the earth and the air to produce a miracle of miracles, oak planks, beams, and furniture. So how often have you looked at your wooden furniture in the house and gone, wow, that's a miracle? Probably never. You will now, hopefully. And therefore, every time we see a piece of wood, we see the result of the miracle of plants, a miracle which takes a tiny insignificant seed and produces solid wood to support people in their houses. And just by reading this, and by reading the logic that's being employed here, you begin to get an understanding of why you read stories about great Jewish sages of old who would spend lots of time in isolation in the wilderness at times. And if anybody ever stumbled upon them, you would find them deep in thought or singing and dancing and really kind of absorbed in something. And, most people that are put in isolation or go out camping and they're by themselves, with the exception of a few types of people, most people find that they become consumed with boredom and they don't like the silence. They don't like being with themselves and themselves only. And we have to go through a process where we are comfortable, but not only comfortable in being isolated, but enjoy it. And it's not to say that we also will enjoy the company of another person and companionship and being social, but we shouldn't see being on our own as being a punishment or a form of torture. It's very much a prerequisite to be someone that is Torah sort of centric, Torah orientated. So if you're such a person that doesn't like being on their own, make opportunities for you to be alone for a day. It might be the Sabbath. Maybe you're in a situation where you can't meet with people on the Sabbath. Then utilize that day for you to just be you, for it to just be you and Hashem. And the way you do that is to learn and to read books and to reread the books and go over the learning that you've learnt and to put it into practice and to perhaps learn some Hebrew, learn some passages by heart perhaps. And learn subjects that are going to have some sort of critical, give you some sort of critical help in some area. Don't just try and learn stuff that's sort of lofty and really deep and complex and sort of beyond you. Learn things that are similar to what we're looking at here and grasp a hold of things that have always been in your field of view, and begin to develop an appreciation for Hashem and an acknowledgement of when you see these things to springboard you into very deep levels of Torah understanding. And from there we can build a foundation and we can go higher and higher and higher. The ancient writers spoke of these wonderful things in their books according to their understanding. There is a wealth of information available for us to study. Since the author's time, our knowledge of the world has been multiplied many times over. And I would say even from the time of Rav Avigdor Miller, which is sort of the 1980s and 90s, we've progressed almost as much as from the time of Rabbi Bakya ibn Pekuda to the time of Rabbi Avigdor Miller, because technology is moving at such a fast rate now. So that's interesting to think about. As it says in 1 Kings 5:13, and Shlomo HaMelech spoke about the trees from the giant cedar tree which is in the forest of Lebanon down to the little hyssop plant which grows out of the wall. Shlomo HaMelech, the most brilliant mind and the greatest Torah scholar of all time, was also a great king who built the Beit HaMikdash. There is so much knowledge in the Torah and its halakot that required his attention, yet of all the things that he might have talked about, he chose to spend time discussing the phenomena of nature. And indeed, Shlomo HaMelech was purported to have been able to communicate with trees and plants. he felt that the details of the various types of plants were deserving of his time. And the Navi, the prophet who wrote the Sefer in which these verses appears, considered it important to inform us of it. Shlomo was an expert in all kinds of plants. He sat on his throne and he spoke with people from all over the country, as well as dignitaries from foreign lands. He talked to them about the wonders that can be seen in the various varieties of plants, starting from the smallest hyssop, which grows like moss on walls, to the biggest of the cedar trees that grow in Lebanon. The wisest man who ever lived considered this topic important enough to hold public dissertations on it, and the world came to listen to him. The Queen of Sheba also came and was overwhelmed with enthusiasm when she heard one of these dissertations. We see that Shlomo HaMelech, that the study of Hashem's world, we see from Shlomo HaMelech that the study of this world is one of the very big subjects to which a person can give a good deal of time in his life. Of course, we need to spend most of our time learning Gemara, but when we attempted to talk Devarim Bitalim, that is idle chatter, we should talk about these subjects. There is no end to the greatness we can achieve in wisdom, character, and in munah from the study of the world that Hashem prepared for us. So this is actually quite a huge topic, and it's really, really important. And I'm glad you clicked on this video, because what I think a lot of people do today is they spend time learning the Zohar, which is a fairly high and lofty text, which is based on the Torah. And then they go away from that learning time and they drop themselves into materialism, and they see the same things that the greats see, but they're oblivious to all the things that are pointing to Hashem in the very basic or sort of mundane things in life that we get used to seeing, so we stop seeing them. Sure, we see them, but we don't see them. And so on the one hand, we're poking around into the lofty, cloudy, heavenly regions of the Zohar, and then we stop doing that, we go back to our normal lives, and we are like babies again. And so we're going from babies to angels with no state in between, enabling us to sort of grow all the vital internal organs that enable us to be sustained in the loftier realms. So perhaps somebody's watching this video that spends time learning Zohar. Here's my challenge to you. Whatever time, whatever schedule you have of learning Zohar, if you're not learning Musar, and you're not at least availing yourselves of the works of Rabbi Bakya Ibn Pekuda in his Duties of the Heart, Kivot HaLevavot, I would start swapping out that scheduled time for learning those works, and then doing that for a period of time and seeing if that is not going to be more beneficial to you, at least as the rubber hits the road. Because I would hazard to guess that there are a lot of people reading the Zohar thinking that they're doing really well in terms of their walk, but in actual fact, they are performing subpar to what they can be in their normal life. And they're finding these moments of refuge in things that are giving them a lot of warm and fuzzy feelings, and getting to know a secret. You know, particularly men, less so women. Men want to find out secrets. They want to know things. They feel like they're empowered because they might know things that not many people know. And this is all imagination and illusion. What rather they should be striving for is to know how to live. How does a righteous man live day to day? It's fine and well and good to find out all these really unique insights and these profound understandings, but when you are away from being regaled by all this spectacle, what are you like on a given day from the moment that you wake up to the time you go to bed? Are you conducting yourself in a way that, you know, is pleasing to the Kadesh Baruch Hu, or is it possible that you could be operating in such a more efficient way, spiritually speaking, than you are at the moment? And that'd be something that I would challenge the viewer to think about, and probably get on your radar some works that deal directly with Musar, because from what I can see, that is the deficiency across the board. and it's robbing a lot of people of the joy they otherwise would get out of their walk. Because, people have become junkies for the profound and the spectacle and for the prophecy and for all the amazing, lofty stories, and they're forgetting that, there's a lifestyle to learn. There's a way of living to learn. There's a way of thinking to learn. There's a way of speaking to learn, a way of eating to learn, a way of dressing to learn, a way of living, and there's a where to live to learn. There's all these things. And they, for the most part, it's just sort of done on the fly, where, okay, maybe I want to set in my daily schedule some learning of how to look at and how to appreciate some aspect of the world and how it can get me to actually gain a deeper insight into Hashem's wisdom on this subject. And then that'll carry across into other subjects. You'll look at other things from a more Torah-centric eye. Even something that might be challenging, something you might be in a situation where you there's a movie playing, so you're watching some sort of movie. Maybe you've walked into a room and it's got nothing to do with the Torah, but there may be a principle at play that's being sort of played out in that scene, and you can see a Torah concept coming through in that scene. It's probably a fairly, drawing a long bow there, or it's a fairly rare example, but this is what will happen. You'll start to see things more with an eye to see Hashem, rather than just to sort of see things and see nothing more than what you can see on face value. Okay, I think we'll leave it there. The secret word is plant. The secret word is plant. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit like, please share, please subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you on the next video. Hashem willing, bye for now.